It's now time for our last 3D chapter in this series here, and this is going to revolve around lighting our character. Lighting is extremely useful, as this is really where we set the tone of the final picture. Remember what we were talking about before when it comes to getting the mood of the character? If you want something to be scary, or comfortable, kind, generally uncomfortable, and any kind of feeling you want, lighting is such a huge part of that. If you're going for kind and warm, you're going to use soft and warm lighting. If you're going for cold and evil, you're going to use lighting from below, maybe you're going to make it like slightly sickly color, a bit more towards yellow and all that. So this is what we're going to do now. We're going to light him like a more sick man. So when we light, I prefer to block in the lights one by one, methodically blocking them in. We don't just add 30 lights and just go crazy with that. We use a system called 3-point light setup. This is something you can Google, and there is a lot of information about this. 3-point light setup simply means we have 3 lights. We have a light from here, or wherever you want to, which is a key light. Then we have a rim light, which can be from here. And then we have a fill light, which can be from here, this works in pretty much every single case. Before we worry about lighting, we need to get the camera right. So we already have a camera set up here, and we're just going to go into that. The camera angle is so important. If the camera angle doesn't work, then you're just in trouble. And also because you can't light without knowing the camera angle, because the rim light here would be from this angle here, but if the camera angle is from this angle, the rim light wouldn't be visible at all. So the lighting is very, very dependent on the camera angle. So let's see, something like this could be cool. I wanted to be pretty cynical, so I wanted to look down a bit like this. And as we talked about before, this is shot production now. If you see something which can be done better, go for it. This is, at this point here, anything goes. This is the final step before we take it into Photoshop to do post-work on it. So the one thing I'm seeing here is he looks straight ahead. Even though he has a pose here, you can see he's like leaning a bit to the side here, which we did in our posing video. We still need to just move the eye out a little bit here. Just rotate it a bit, so maybe he looks towards the viewer or something like that. Just rotate the camera a bit here, and then we just want to play a bit with this. And the way we rotate this is, if you go to item mode now, you can see that our pivot, or as it's called in Modo, the center, is all the way down here. So we need to move it up here. You could also go into component mode and just simply rotate it here, but then you're committing a mortal sin of 3D. Never do this, because you see here, we rotate here, but then we go back into it and it's zeroed out. What we want to do, we always want to use the components over here, because this we can zero out. And the way we make sure the center is centered is we can use our fancy little pie menu, which we showed in one of the first videos, actually the first video. Or we can go to Edit, Center Selected, Center to bounding box, and hit Center. Now we're going to get our center here. So do that for both the eyes here. Edit, Center to bounding box, and hit Center. And then we can just rotate a bit over here. This is what we talked about in the posing video. This is just like adding a bit more interest. The head is facing one way. Let's make the eyes face the other. So already you can see there is more visual interest here. If you hit the O key, we can disable wireframe. Let's just disable this. My scroll accidentally happened. So active meshes, we can set the wireframe overlay to none. And inactive meshes, we can also just, I prefer to have this set to, make inactive set it same as active. I don't like. I like to have my inactive meshes set to something like shaded. And the wireframe set to off. I prefer this when I'm working, to be honest. So something like this can work as a camera angle. I'm just going to make sure our resolution here is set to, yeah, this is fine. We can also just set this up to full HD. This is a pretty cool trick here. If you can make these here play along, so the relationship is the same. So you can just double click this one, and they're just going to scale up perfectly. So we can just scale this up until we get 1920, 1080. We can also just type it in. Well, whatever works for you. done. Just so we have a high resolution. We could also just multiply this by like 0.5 or 1.5. Would have been fine. Alright, we have our camera angle. Now let's enable the preview. You enable the preview by hitting the F8 button. So now you can see we now have a camera angle here. Alright, let's just work a little bit more on it. We can always just try to play a little bit more with it. So going to the camera view, I just want to look a bit more down, to be a bit more aggressive like this. Yeah, something this is cooler. We can just play a bit with more of the eyes as well. I wanted the eyes to be a bit more cynical like this. Alright, this is pretty cool camera angle. Also, make sure that everything has been subdivided. If one of the pieces has not been subdivided, you're going to see faceting when it comes to displacement maps. So let's work a little bit more with it. And this is something you can just tweak forever. You can always tweak the camera angle a bit more. Alright, this I'm pretty happy with. Let's just move it a bit down so you can see a bit more of the hair. And this is one of my favorite features in Modo. This is the preview renderer. This is amazingly powerful. And not a lot of render engines out there actually have this. You can find this in Arnold and V-Ray as well, but I find this one to be by far the most feature-rich. So okay, so we currently have our scene here now with the camera perfectly set up. And then we have our very, very temporary lights. So we're just going to disable those. I'm just going to make a new group and call them temp light. Because they might be nice to have for later on. I'm also going to disable the visibility of the environment. I don't want this in the background here. I still think it's kind of cool to have some environment in here because you do get some reflections from it and some color. So that's nice. Now we're going to create an area light. Area lights are awesome in the way that they look very nice. They're easy to control. There is nothing voodoo about them. They just work. And we access them. We get them by going under new item menu, new item, and area light. Or we can do it through here, through item, add item, and area lights. Or you can use my nice little menu, which we discussed in optimizing Modo for faster modeling. If you hit Control 1, you get up this menu here. This is a pie menu, which allows you to toggle locator, cameras, and all that kind of stuff. So toggle lights, and you can see that. And this is really useful. You use this a fair bit when you're working, just to quickly toggle stuff. So for instance, toggle work plane. You don't really want the grid here, so we can just toggle the work plane on or off. So okay, cool. Light and camera. So we do lighting based on the same principles as we do anything else in 3D. If you paid attention to our series now, the way Morten and I work is from general to specific. That's true if you do an idea. You're starting with the big picture, then you like narrow down the idea. You start with sculpting. You work from bony landmarks down to the fine wrinkles here. And same with lighting. We start with blocking it in. So you can see here, we just start with one light. One light only. Just put this in here under light group. And I'm going to group it right away. And this is just going to be called light 01. I usually have several different light setups. So once I'm happy with a setup or it doesn't work, I'll just duplicate the light setup and I'll just rotate the entire group around. And then I can just very quickly preview the various light setups here. So I know I want an uncomfortable feeling for this guy. And if you're going for uncomfortable feeling, you don't go from straight lighting like this, because this here does nothing for you. It looks maybe, it looks all right. But if you want real uncomfort in a mood, you need to do something unnatural. You need to do something like this. Something where the lighting doesn't feel natural. The reason stuff is uncomfortable like this is because it's unusual. You wouldn't really see this kind of lighting in nature. Like, when could you see this kind of like underlit lighting here in nature? It wouldn't really happen. This is an artificial kind of lighting. While something like this, you would see in nature. This could be the sunlight. This could be anything. So we're going to block it in by doing the uncomfortable lighting. Blocking in, and also the size of the area light as well matters. If the area light is big, you're going to get soft shadows. If the area light is small, you're going to get sharp shadows. Simply because the rays are now firing off here, and the bigger the surface is, the softer shadows are going to be. But you're also going to have to increase the intensity of the light as well. So let's just do that. Let's try 20. I go extreme and then I withdraw back. That's the way I work in 3D with designs with anything. I'd much rather go to take it to the extreme level, like an overexposed result like this, and then draw back, than to incrementally go from like 1 to 2.5. Because it's so much easier to take it back than to add to it. This is particularly true when it comes for designs. It's really hard to do brave designs. So go to 11 and then take it back. Let's try this out here. I kind of like this. I kind of like the shadow we're getting here for the eye as well. Still just blocking it out, seeing what we can get here. Moving a bit over here. No, I want to be a bit broader. Something like this is pretty cool. I want a little bit more light, like around here. And when you do anything in 3D, it's just a mantra: keep it simple, stupid. The simpler you do it here, the easier it's going to be for you. It's so easy to light yourself into a corner. Then we're going to name this and call it key light. And you can see my naming is tight. There is no ambiguity here. This is the key light. This becomes so important down the line once you get into more production stuff. If your lighting is, your names are ambiguous, you're just in trouble. It becomes really hard to share assets and to know what you've been doing. I also going to show you a really quick little tip here, which is work in black and white. Currently we have color here, and color is very, very secondary to good values. Let's disable saturation, which is found under render, final color output, and then saturation. This way we can evaluate the lighting without the interference of color. This is so important that you're not bogged down by color. Color is really important in a picture, but it's secondary to good values. So cool, we have our key light. And we're going to add color to this later on, because if it's all just black and white, it's going to be sterile. At least, if the lighting is going to be black and white. So just duplicate light. You duplicate light by hitting Control D. And we're going to name this rim light. Or whatever naming convention you prefer. It's a good idea to keep the suffix for everything the same, such as we name it geo or light, because then you can use simple scripting, which means you can select all the pieces named geo. This has saved my butt so many times in production. You just have to select so many things at the same time and you just go boom, all geometries selected. So you can see it's very overexposed, but again, that's intentional. We take it to the extreme and then take it back. So rim light and 10. We also need an additional light here, which is the fill light. Currently it gets really black in this region here. So we're just going to add a bit of fill light to it. I think I'm also going to just disable the environment here, the HDRI. Because I think the specularity is more distracting than anything. Or so now we actually have true blacks here. I think I want this to be a bit sharper as well. See, this is why we set up the camera angle initially, because now we can work with this. And we know that we're not going to do something stupid like this. Because if this is the camera angle, suddenly it looks flat. But if this is the camera angle, it looks interesting. So please lock the camera angle before you do any lighting. Another one here, and call this fill. Obviously you don't have to stick to 3-point lighting. This just works for me. You can totally just have one light and go crazy with that. But 3-point light setup, it's tested and it works. Let's try this. Sometimes as well, you can also just, instead of decreasing the intensity, you can just move it further from the camera, or from the character. And try this too. We're probably gonna have to decrease this a fair bit here. Alright, so we have the lighting blocked in now. And you know, it looks alright. But let's see how it looks with color. This is also something I've been requesting for some years now. Having a black and white button in the preview here. Just going, boop, black and white. That would have been really useful. You could, of course, just have two final color outputs. One being black and white and just switch between them here. But, you know, it would be nice for just a button with no workaround. So this looks pretty sweet now. I'm just going to add some color to this. Because color, as I said, is important. Light. Actually, let's just delete the directional lights. They're just a bit annoying here. Hit the delete key. Because now we can just see it here. And this is also why we keep the naming tight here. Because now we have, you know, there is no ambiguity here. Key light, rim light, and fill light. We know exactly what's going on. And when working with this, I try to keep the colors opposites. So warm and cool. Or cool and warm. We're going to try with warm first. And this is a direction I like. I like that this looks warm. And it almost looks cool right away, just as a contrast. There is no color on this, but it almost looks like this, like almost blue color. Then we can choose the rim. And let's just make this a bit blue. See how this works. I have a feeling I named this incorrectly. This is the fill light. Which happens. Let's rename this. Rim. A couple of you are probably screaming through your computer screens at me right now. Alright, that's fixed. Let's revert the fill light back to white. And then go to the actual rim light. I got a bit confused there, seeing how the rim light wasn't actually changing. So let's change this to something like, something blue, something cold. It doesn't have to be blue, you know, you could just have this is the warmer colors and these are the cooler colors. And you can just try this out. This looks pretty cool. I want to reduce the intensity a little bit as well. Just decrease this down to something like 8 and see how this works. That's pretty nice. Let's just enable GI as well. This is something I do a fair bit. I go between enabling and disabling GI because it renders a lot faster. And when you're dealing with characters in a closed environment like this, you're not really seeing too much of the GI anyway. We can also just enable the environment again, just to see what it looks like. Enable GI, make sure that's on. And then we can just go down here to the environment. And then we can just enable indirect rays. This could be nice to get some like overall color to the model. But we're probably not going to use it. But let's just try it out. Maybe we get like some more fill here. You usually get nicer reflections by this as well. So let's just enable reflection rays and see what it looks like. No, it's too crazy. Let's just have a little bit for the bounce. And then we can add some color to the fill light. This is something I see a lot of people forgetting about. If you have an interesting fill light, you can get a lot more variation in your final piece. So go in here and add a color to it. People are so afraid of adding colors to their fill lights. I just go crazy with this. It's like doing color grading in Photoshop, just in Modo. So you can try something like this, adding a bit of like this sickly yellow color. So this here looks pretty good. One thing I'm a bit concerned about is this extremely bright highlight here. Currently, my focus is here. If you squint your eyes now, you can see that the focus is here. I want the focus to be in this region here. So primary focus and secondary focus, and then like a third focus kind of down here. So let's fix that. Let's just take the rim light and just move it a bit up. Just so we're getting rid of the really hot spot right here. And lighting just takes a lot of time to learn. I mean, if you can't get this right on first try, that's fine. This is not an easy thing to get right on the first try. One thing I want to do as well, I just want to double check the look depth for the eyes here, for the eyes outer, because I think the reflection is a bit blurry on them. So eyes outer, they just look a bit soft here. Roughness, I just set this down. There we go. Now the eyes are getting brighter here. Again, remember, low value means shiny, high value means blurry. This is what we painted with the specular roughness map earlier on. I want the hair to be a less specky as well. So just increase the roughness. Alright, so this is working pretty well for me. We can do a couple of things here. We can add layer passes or render layers, AOVs, whatever you want to call them. Here they're called color outputs. We can duplicate it. We can set this to ambient occlusion, which is under lighting and ambient occlusion. You can change this here to ambient occlusion, and now you can see the result. This is really cool. So you can have one which is AO broad, then you can duplicate it and have it to be AO sharp. I just hit escape key a couple times here because we're getting a lot of attributes here. And all the way in the bottom we have the range. 0 means infinite, and then we can just increase it from infinite to a specific value. So then we're getting like a really sharp AO here. We can just disable GI. So we now have a broad and we have a sharp. And this is really nice to do like some fake color grading or enhancing details or whatever you want to do in Photoshop later on. So review this. Just try a couple of different things. One thing we can do is, like I was talking about before, you can duplicate your lights. Control D to duplicate your entire group here. And then just rotate it around. Take the entire group and just rotate it around. Because we have a backup of this. We have a backup here, so nothing is going to happen to this. This is an extremely useful tool for me, because then you just get a different look right away. In like 2 seconds, you have a vastly different character here. So all these are working pretty well for me. But as we designed this around the way it was before, which is pretty much exactly this is what I'm going to go for. Maybe actually a little bit like this. I kind of like that there is some contrast here. Make sure that you're viewing the final image with GI on. You don't want to make any rash decisions based on this if the GI is off, because the GI can drastically alter the look. I also just want to change the shading a little bit on the shirt, because it's a bit too shiny. So increase the roughness here. So something like more like this, because a shirt isn't shiny. Alright, a little bit more sharpness here on the back. And then we're going to call this done. It's really cool in the preview as well how you can just paint where you want details. This has saved me so many times in a way that I don't have to re-render the entire thing or just wait for the picture to compute. I can just like paint around the eyes and I'll just get really nice details right away. So these are the useful settings here. Global illumination and displacement. These are the ones I use the most when it comes to the preview here. This is also really useful. This is just this is a completely separate topic. But render animation. Let's say you have 200 frames and you just need to preview them. You can just hit render animation and it's going to give you like a time slider. How much time do you have? I have 5 minutes or I have 60 minutes. If you have 60 minutes, it's going to render all the frames in 60 minutes, which is very practical when you're dealing with deadlines. You just want to have a first pass of your lighting. So by those, you don't have to optimize anything. But at the end of those 60 minutes, you're going to have a render. You're going to have a render of those 200 frames, whatever you specified. Let's just double check here. Our settings are fine here. We're not going to go too deep into the settings, the render settings here, because they're complicated. Let's face it, Modo is not a simple render engine to use. And our settings here are probably going to be fine. One thing I do want to I just want to emphasize here is we can change the minimum edge length probably from the default setting here to something like 1 millimeter. Wrong button. 1 millimeter. Because otherwise it's going to mean that the lowest polygon here is going to be tiny, really tiny. We can also enable displacement as bump. This is going to put as much as it can into the displacement map or into actual polys, and the rest is going to just put into the bump map. Very useful. Let's just review and see if there's anything useful. Global illumination. This is a topic we're not going to cover here. One thing, just to be clear, is if you're doing like really advanced characters, this is fine. This is not a real advanced character, but if you're doing like really high poly scenes with lots of polys, you don't want to use irradiance caching. You want to use only brute force or Monte Carlo indirect illumination, only top one here. You can also enable or change all the light samples here. In previous versions, you had to go into every single light and change the samples here. But we're currently changing all of that directly through the settings here. So we can just set this to something like 256. So now we should get really nice shadows here. We can also enable a couple of more render passes here. I get really confused when it comes to terminology here. Some renderers call them AOVs. Arnold called them AOVs. Arbitrary output variable. Some call them render passes. And here, as I said, is called color outputs. We can enable specularity. Let's see, we found that one. Shading and specular shading. Specular shading is really useful because again, we can actually evaluate the specularity here. You can see exactly what's going on. And if you were to work in a proper 32 or floating point linear workflow pipeline, you would have a lot more of these. But we're working in a kind of bootleg, in a very bootleg concept artist pipeline for this. I mean, it's important what we're doing in the end, but this is not a legit comp workflow. We're just taking whatever we get in Modo, the beauty layer, and just like painting some stuff onto it in Photoshop later on. This is not a proper professional lighting workflow, just so that's absolutely clear. But these are helpful. These are very helpful. So let's just evaluate these. Let's just evaluate the shaders. Make sure everything is there. Make sure all the displacement maps are there. Specular roughness is fine. That's all there. Just tweak it a bit. I think I just want a bit more control for the spec R. Yeah, that's nice. Just a bit. It's just a bit shinier now in these regions here. And when it comes to stuff like the subsurface scattering for the ear, that's something we can always tweak that in Photoshop later on. We do have, just to be clear on this as well, this is very quick look dev on here. The look dev done here is literally just slap the maps into the shader. We do have a scene following along with this tutorial, which is called Improved, which you can find, which looks like this. This is the improved one. It looks pretty similar, but it's the look dev has been improved using the actual skin shader found in Modo as well. While it's not a particularly good skin shader, which we ranted about before, it is better than what we currently have. It's just a bit outside the scope of this tutorial to cover skin shading, but this just, the lighting here is pretty much the same as what we're currently doing, but it has some more advanced features into the skin shading. So you might want to just play with that. So that's old man improved lighting. You can just see that the head is using a different shader. It's using the skin material. So feel free to play around with that. This is also the version we are supplying the comp file with. There's a Photoshop file along with this series, and we're using this one as the basis. In the next video, we're doing a slightly different version of this lighting here to do post-work on, but the principles are identical. So everything we do in the next video is, even though the result is slightly different than what we're seeing here, in this one here, the principles are the same. So alright, cool. The lighting here is working pretty well for me now. Let's just render this out. We double checked our settings, and we need to just save the scene. Lighting end. And now we can just render it out. We render by going to render and hitting render here, or simply by hitting F9. Just one real quick thing here before we hit render. Make sure the camera is selected here. I've done this so many times where I've had multiple cameras in the scene and the wrong camera has been rendering. So that's it. Render. Alright, so our render is done. This only took a couple of minutes and looks pretty decent with what we had to work with here. A couple of things just to be aware of is we're currently seeing a lot of pixelating here. And this is simply due to the resolution we're working in ZBrush here. If we want to improve this beyond what we're having here, we need to spend way more time on defined details, and we would not do those in ZBrush. We would do those in Mari, really getting into like proper texturing, proper fine details. And we'd also have to paint a lot more maps. A specular roughness map and a color map is not just going to fly. We need bump, we need like a proper specular roughness map, you know, really getting into the various details. The one we painted was fine, but we just need to be more aware of the various regions. And we just need a better skin shader here. The skin shader here is not a skin shader. We just need something which is more solid. So with that said, we just go to save image, we hover over it, we go to save layered image. Then we just find a location for it and call it something like master comp 01. And this is simply going to save out all our render outputs into one file, which we can then open in Photoshop.